right, welcome back to Untangled, everybody. Today's guest is Sarah Childers, a UX slash product inclusive design expert with more than 10 years of experience. Certified in accessibility core competencies, she specializes in shaping customer experiences that are usable and accessible for everyone. She's designed across multiple industries, including finance, e commerce, healthcare, and software as a service. She also mentors newer designers while leading projects from discovery through implementation. Welcome to the show, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I'll set the stage for you. So my audience is a mix of people that kind of that early stage. What is design? Do I want to be a designer or, whatever under the umbrella, as well as people who've been doing this a long time who are like, I don't know what's next for me. Okay. So if we can just kind of set the stage, we'll start kind of like who you are and how you got here, and then we'll dive deep into like accessibility. Okay. So let's start with my favorite question. Sarah, how did you get into UX?
So, this is a pretty common story, I feel like. When I started in UX, I graduated from the University of Northern Iowa with a degree in art and emphasis in graphic design. So, my first job out of college was at a commercial real estate company where I did mainly print materials like flyers, brochures, all those things, advertising the real estate property. And my manager came up to me one day and was like, "Hey, we need a website." And I said, "Oh, that would be good, but I've never like coded a website. I built it in tables. This was like back in 2010 when it was like slicing and dicing the interface and putting it into a table format." And he's like, "Oh, I have confidence that you'll figure it out." And I'm like, "Okay." So what I started doing was just looking up on YouTube and reading articles about how to code, and that was really the foundation of like understanding the interface, understanding the different areas of the code, and eventually at my next role that morphed into at an insurance company where I was a senior UX designer, and again focusing on like the coding, the design. And then my manager told me about a book called Stephen Krug, Don't Make Me Think.
My favorite book, one of my favorite books. I tell everybody to start there. Yeah.
Yep. So it was a great book. It opened my eyes to not only like am I designing an interface, I'm designing it to be usable. Things are easy to find for users. I watched another UXer do like a card sort activity for navigation, and so I thought, wow, this is more than what I thought initially doing web design, but it really makes an impact on how people use an experience. And so after that, I transferred over to an e-commerce company, and that was my first UX role. And that after being there for a chunk of time, I really learned a lot. That was really eye-opening being at that company.
So I noticed that you call yourself a designer, but I saw some very research kind of
Mhm.
activities in there.
Yep.
So break that down for me. How much of you is a designer? How much of you is a researcher?
I would say I'm 50-50. So
Okay.
a lot of my career started out in the designer role. And then I feel like once I got to that e-commerce company, I really started learning about usability testing, understanding what's the goal of designing, say, like a landing page. I would meet with stakeholders and ask them, what's the number one goal you want to get out of this design? Understanding more of the process, more so than, oh, let's make a website. And so I think that's really when things started to shift for me. And then they focused on rebuilding it into a responsive website. And so then a lot of usability testing came into that. How do we redesign the site to be responsive, but then also how can we engage our users in using that site? How can they easily get from like the home page to where we want them to convert?
I find it fascinating when I meet designers who will actually say to me, of all people, right? Like they don't trust research, they don't use research. What would you tell those designers who don't really see a need for research?
I would tell them that you're not only designing for yourself or your company or your team, you're designing for people outside of your typical, workplace bubble, essentially. It took me a while to understand that and to start taking honest feedback from users. I think that's a growing point for a lot of people who go from design into like research design, product design, is that shift of your mindset a little bit, going more from trying to understand how something is just cosmetic versus how someone will use it.
I like that. I like that a lot. I also noticed that you use the words distinctively product versus UX designer. So, what is the difference?
That is a great question. So I really didn't understand that there was a difference until I joined that software as a SaaS company. It was an HR company. And so they were more product driven. And so it's funny because one of the things that we did was we grabbed this book. I don't know if you've,
I haven't seen that one. Okay.
yeah. So continuous discovery habits, essentially it's research and then putting research in your discovery process.
Okay.
So if there's a new feature that the team wants to build, you know, using customer feedback, being able to talk to a customer at least once a week, doing some sus testing, showing them a prototype, asking them, you know, how easy is this to use? And then flipping that to the other side of, you know, I would find this product easy to use, incorporating that user feedback. And we also did a design sprint there, which is
Mm.
really fun. I don't know if you've been part of a design sprint before, but those are definitely eye opening. It's fast. You make a prototype, you like ideate, and then at the very end, you bring in those end users and they give you feedback on that prototype. So,
Those to me seem to be the most valuable. So I like that. So my favorite research methodology is a right study, right? So that rapid iterative testing. And I feel
mhm.
like that's like the best combination of that. Having designers who can use the feedback, but then actually getting that feedback from real people. And fast makes it even better, right? We are done. Done. All right.
Definitely.
Um, talk to me about what it means to be an inclusive designer.
Ooh, this is my favorite topic. So, what it means to be an inclusive designer. This was a journey over years for me. I think when I joined that e commerce company and we were redesigning the website, making it responsive, one of the things that really started my journey, and I still think back to that to this day, was we did usability testing and I was sitting with the user asking them how they would navigate the site, what do they think about this feature, that type of thing. And one of the things that that user pointed out was there's red on this screen and green. He didn't say that, but he said, "Oh, I think these colors are the same." And I go, "What do you mean?" He's like, "They're the same color." And I'm like, "No, they're two different colors." And he goes, "Well, yeah, they seem the same to me." And I was like, wow, what I'm designing every day is making an impact for everyone. Like that was a new lens for me to be able to talk to someone who was colorblind and be like, they look the same to me. And that really opened my eyes.
And I love that he said it, right? Because oftentimes we miss that feedback because either they don't know that it's wrong, right?
Mhm.
Whatever that means, right? Or we don't think to ask the question. So coming out of that experience, how did that moment impact you as a designer going forward?
Yeah, that impacted me going forward by understanding, you know, everyone should be able to use a website or a digital interface or software as a service all the same. I think equal access is important. And so, one of the things that really kind of followed me as I progressed in my career was when I was at that HR software company. It was interesting because I worked with an engineer, and that person, you know, worked on the design system, had code, like snippets and things that we worked together on and created code snippets. And one of the things that person always mentioned was this needs to be usable by someone with a screen reader. And I'm like, screen reader? What is a screen reader? And so I Googled it and I was like, oh, a screen reader reads back a digital interface to someone. And so I took the Nielsen Norman Group Interaction Design Foundation course on accessibility. And that was really enlightening because you actually, in that course, they have someone using a mobile interface and they're explaining like what it's telling them or things that are confusing. And I was like, wow, that related to my other experience I had. So I kept seeing themes like that. And I was like, and everyone should use a website equally. So when I was at the transportation company, I met an accessibility specialist there. And they were mentioning how it's important to build accessible products, inclusive design, basically screen reader. Again, I kept hearing that similar theme. And I was like, I am really interested in this. Well, that person introduced me to another UXer within the Omaha area. And that person, was an advocate for user experience, gave presentations for inclusive design, and had a certification in accessibility. And I go, you know what? I want to do this. Like, this is a common theme I'm hearing. I want to make an impact in people's lives. I want to meet the user where they are. And so I decided to study up on accessibility and got certified within that topic. So, yeah.
What is one misconception people have about designing for accessibility or creating accessible experience?
I think the biggest misconception is that it comes down, to my mind, it comes down to understanding the structure of a web page, understanding how people will digest that content. So, with accessibility, there's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So, those include something that's perceivable, is information seen and easily heard by the user. It's operable. Can that interface be navigated with keyboard only? So an example of that I can think of is what if tomorrow I broke my arm and can't use my mouse? How am I going to navigate, for my job? I would use my keyboard. Another principle to add on to that is understandable. Can the content be understandable from someone with 9 years of education? And then the last one is robust. So this is a big one. Can the interface be understandable by multiple devices? With responsive design, sometimes I know in different browsers, it can get the experience can change. So coding that experience to be usable across Mozilla, Firefox, through Edge, through Google Chrome. With phones, the code is different too, but making sure that experience can be navigated with the screen reader is important.
I remember the first time I heard a study or watched a study with the screen reader. What are some of the things that people will find shocking about listening to a screen reader?
I agree. So one of the things that I remember first hearing a screen reader and how it would go through a page, and it read fast. It would say something like header, navigation, menu, and it would go through the page so fast. I had to slow down. You can slow down the screen reader to dictate slower. So that way, you can understand it. But someone who listens to a screen reader every day, that's the perfect, speed for them to hear how that content's being read. So I think that's one of the biggest adjustments. And then when I share with my team at work, this is how a screen reader is currently reading this screen or that screen, they're like, oh, because it's intimidating at first. It's like, oh, it's
Mhm.
reading the markup of the page. And so that's why I think understanding some of the code structure and then understanding the page content and how it reads is really important, because there's automated testing tools out there that will read, a page and say there's this accessibility issue that we should fix. But I feel like 40% of those issues, 40% of the time, it should be someone like a physical person navigating through that interface.
Okay. Okay. Um, all right. I'm thinking about that conversation, right? So we talk about having to communicate like UX findings, right? But I think communicating accessibility findings is like takes it to a whole nother level. So how is that different, if at all, communicating accessibility findings versus traditional UX findings?
I would say it is different because accessibility findings sometimes are more specific. So I've done a report before with a previous company I was at, going through and documenting all the different accessibility recommendations that I had. So with those four categories, there's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Marking down, this is the issue that happened, and this is the guideline that it relates to. So connecting those two together versus user experience findings, I feel like are more conversational a little bit, but then there's also themes with it. And granted, there could be themes with accessibility. So they go hand in hand theme wise, but I feel like one is more technical sometimes in nature with accessibility versus usability, and user experience research is more conversational, and then understanding how the user
Okay.
is navigating an interface.
So part of my screen slowed down on me, so I'll have to go back and hear that part. But can you share? So one of the things, we're always talking about ROI, right? I think it's even harder sometimes to have that ROI conversation when it comes to accessibility. So
Yeah.
what would you tell people who are struggling with trying to make a case for why accessibility design or research is even necessary?
I would say it's necessary and the ROI is important because, there's that thinking of shifting left. So, shifting left basically means working ahead before those issues get into developers' hands, before those issues can arise in a production environment. So, I think shifting left is important, working ahead of it. But then also, when an issue is in a production environment, it can cost, I believe it's 10 times the amount to fix versus addressing that issue at the very beginning. And so that can show the value. And then in addition, I know the European Accessibility Act was just passed over in Europe in June of this year. And so that is making an impact. It's becoming almost a legal requirement that we follow those accessibility standards over there. And so I feel like that's going to trickle down into the United States eventually.
Yeah, that's what I hear. That there's probably some things coming up early part of next year where it will be like EMEA, right? And you have to follow those guidelines. Have you had any type of pushback from the business or your design team on doing that accessibility research or testing?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of pushback in the past, but I think educating the organization and also educating the team and understanding that, this, say it's say an example I like to use is a button. So say there are 5 buttons on a page and they all say learn more. Well, to a user using a screen reader, it's like learn more about, like, they visually can't see the screen. So then it's learn more about what? And so adding that in there can help the user convert and help them move forward in an interface versus having the same terminology per each button, I feel like.
Yeah. That was one of the things for me, how much context we expect people to get from other things on the page. And if that person can't see it, right, then they lose all of that context. Do you have any stories? I call them wins. Do you have any wins that you can share where you discovered something from an accessibility standpoint that improved or made a product or experience better?
I would say an accessibility when I was on a project and we were working through like the user acceptance testing phase. And so the product manager asked me to help out with that. And when I was going through, I was like, oh, uh, a modal was activated. So I was using the screen reader. And so you can tab through different interactive elements on the interface. And when you press enter, that's when something is triggered, similar to when you click with the mouse. And so when I triggered that modal and then I heard the screen reader reading through that modal pop up, it started reading the content behind the modal. And I was thinking to myself, this would cause confusion because we're wanting to focus the user on that content in the modal. And then the focus moved behind and the screen reader started reading the content behind. And so that was something that I brought up that could cause, confusion. Someone like, oh, what's all this information? It says it's in this modal pop-up window, but then there's all this information being read to me and then they can get confused there.
I think
So
one of my takeaways from that was when I saw it, and then in the story that you just described, is like where that excessive that testing falls, right? So I think it kind of sits in that gray area. It's after
yes.
design, right? After
Mhm.
it's built. So then the question becomes who's responsible for it. So
Yep.
then what is your response to that? Who is responsible for that piece when you find it that late in development?
Usually it's the quality assurance, the QA that finds that. Going through at the e-commerce company I was at, they had a QA that would go through the interface and double check and make sure things were accessible or links accessible. Can, users click on links with the enter key, or not click, but press on the keyboard. And so that's why that almost creates more technical debt in the long run, because maybe we might not be able to fix that issue depending on the amount of time it would go to production. So I think definitely working with developers and shifting left, basically working ahead with the UX team, attending, design ops meetings, understanding this is the design. How do we communicate with this design or these colors, color contrast, all those different things come into play, and identifying those standards, and then working with a engineer to create those code snippets within like a engineer or developer library. I know in the past I've worked with engineers and they use Storybook. And so documenting those accessible code snippets at the beginning, and then those developers could start pulling from those. And then that helps decrease the amount of issues found later.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so thinking you have several accessibility certifications. So let's talk through those.
Yeah.
So why the certification? Why did you go down that path versus just incorporating that into your design process?
I went down that path because I think it's important to understand who interfaces are designed for, how they will use that interface. Screen readers are the foundation of any accessible or assistive technology. And so there's devices such as switch devices, there's sip and puff software, there's multiple devices out there where they use that screen reader code and all that as a base, and then that takes the device that the user uses, basically uses that foundational piece. So I think that definitely impacts, someone's experience as they're navigating through interface. An example I can think of is every page that a user touches, and we don't think about it sometimes because we see visually what the page looks like, but the navigation at the top of the screen. So say I'm on a home page of a website and I go through with a screen reader, it says home, about us, more information. Then I go to about us, and then it says home, about us, more information again. That can cause frustration for someone. So that's why sometimes if you turn on a screen reader or start tabbing through your keyboard, you'll see on a website at the top it says skip to main content.
Hmm.
So that will let the user skip those repeated navigational, steps. If they've already heard it, they don't want to hear it again. They just want to get to what they're looking for.
Um, so thinking about that piece specifically, I think it is going back to the question I asked you earlier. What was surprising to me is the fact that everything on that page is red, right? Like the
Yes.
content is red, the structure is red, like all of those things. So, what advice would you have? So, I love the skip to content. Is there any other tips and tricks that you have that would help with that? Just the cognitive load of having to listen to all of those pages.
Yeah, so a screen reader, and this is available on a desktop and a mobile device. There's a rotor, a tool called the rotor. And so when you bring that rotor up, it'll go through the interface. You can navigate by headings. If you don't want to navigate by headings and be like, oh, I don't want to navigate by that, you can navigate by form elements. You can navigate by all the links on the page. So that's where that caters to that user who's using assistive technology. Is it's catering to what they want to look at or what they want to basically navigate to on that screen.
So is that set up at the user level? Is that in the design? Is that a decision that the user makes, how they
That
want to navigate the page?
that is a decision the user makes, but so the rotor is predefined by the operating system, but
Okay.
that can be customized. So say for some reason we don't want to show, there's no form on the screen, then we can hide that form setting. That way the user doesn't have to see that when that's not on the screen.
Okay. So we were talking about your certifications. Is there any one thing that stood out to you, like that aha moment? This was like, yeah, I needed this certification, or I needed to hear this information.
I would say the biggest thing was it put you in someone else's shoes. It explained, all the different types of disabilities, how someone would navigate an experience based on that disability. So it really puts you in their shoes. I think of, and I always joke, I love this about our household, is that we watch Superman movies. And so what's interesting about that is we went to go see a movie one day and I saw a preview and for Christopher Reeves. And I was like, I want to see that documentary about him, because it's like after I studied all this information about accessibility, disability, inclusive design, I want to hear it from someone who has experienced that. And so we watched it as a family, and I told my family, I go, this is why I want to do what I do, is because it makes an impact on everyone's life. Everyone should be able to use something the same way. Sorry, I'm almost like tearing up about it because it's very impactful just to know that you're designing for every user out there. And it's just it just makes a difference. I want to make a difference in people's lives.
That is the key moment, right? Like we don't do this for fun, right? We're doing it because we are thinking about somebody, like an actual person. It is very different than how we approach design, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, where we designed for the 80%, right? And it's
Yep.
like, but if we got really good at that 20%, we would make it better for the
Yes.
80%. So
Yes.
so what does your family think you do for a living?
It's funny because I'll be working and my son will come up and say, "Is that what you do?" And I'll show him, and he's like, "Wow, that is so cool. You designed all those screens?" I say, "Yeah, yeah." And they're just in awe of, things I even use at school. I mean, I could eventually do that someday. Like, I definitely want them to see that determination, creating all of those inclusive experiences that are equal for everyone. It's just exciting to talk about, to make an impact.
I love that because my son doesn't think I know anything. We were talking about, I think, the Chick-fil-A app, and he was like, "Do you know how to use that?" And I was, "Sir, do you not do you understand what I do for a living? Clearly not. Come to work. You have to come to work with me." Thinking about your career, Sarah, is there something that you've learned along the way that you wish you had learned sooner?
Ooh, I like this question. I would say being more proactive, having a proactive mindset versus reactive. In my career, I've noticed that working through, some different situations, being more reactive can actually make you think, I need to get this done, I need to get this out there. And then my brain will just skip oh, how will someone use this? Having that research come in, that research portion before changing something if it's in a live environment or even if it's a new concept, a new prototype, you need that user feedback because we can hypothesize and guess all day long, well, I would do this. But in the end, I'm not the end user, that other person on the other side of the screen or other side of the devices. And so having that continuous discovery and research is very important to help us, make good decisions and experiences for the end user.
How do you balance that with the speed of business?
That is a great question as well. I would say so. I have worked in lean UX, so that can be done. There is, the traditional process of, okay, we have this feature we want to do. I'm going to go look at competitors. Then I'm going to go see what are the trends in the industry. And then I'm going to do maybe some wireframing. And then I'm going to show that to the stakeholders, get their feedback. And then I'm going to do a high fidelity design. And then I'm going to test that. I mean, that can become lengthy because you're coordinating business people, you're coordinating the product manager, you're coordinating research people, and putting that all into a process that can take time. So I think more of an iterative approach of being lean. So if there's an existing experience and the conversion percent is not where we want it to be, taking that one area, focusing on that one thing that we want to like discover or see what's happening to for users not to go through with that conversion, basically narrowing our focus down. I mean, it's important to do those, I would call them micro interaction updates. That way we understand, if we make this change or if we A/B test this, how will that perform? So I think it's important to definitely think of scope as well when you're a designer. It's not only technology that thinks of scope.
What is one way that stands out in your mind that design has changed since you first got into this space?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say what has changed obviously is AI. I know that's the big hype coming out nowadays. I think the thing that has changed is having that discovery mindset, understanding how users either is if it's through Google Analytics, if it's through session recording software, no matter what it is, understanding their behaviors, tracking event clicks, using the data if there is data out there to your advantage. I think that is huge in order to optimize those experiences.
So you touched on AI for just a second. So I would consider that like, one of the things that is happening. So what is
Yep.
your take on AI in design right now?
Yeah, so I think AI is definitely can definitely benefit us. I think one of the things that I've seen is Figma will have that model context protocol where it can connect to a code and people can create coded prototypes really quickly. Well, what I've seen with that is the accessibility portion, right? So when I go look at the code that it makes, it's all like in divs. It's like div, 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 div. Well, screen readers, when they read the code, there's like main. So when that skip to main content, it would skip to that main tag, and then it's more descriptive. And so I think AI has a long way to go, but AI is really good at, in Miro, I've used this before. After doing research and doing sticky notes, it's really good at like organizing tags and themes. So I think that's where we, from a research perspective, we could use those tags and themes to our advantage to understand, what's the user sentiment? Is this a user need? Is this a user expectation? It's very good at organizing and analyzing data.
Okay. And you already answered my next question. Is there yet an intersection between AI and accessibility design or research? So where do you see this going? So you said it's not there yet, but what do you hope that intersection becomes?
I hope that AI gets implemented into coding experiences that are accessible. The thing that concerns me about AI is the data privacy, but I know there's specific architecture and security measures that you can definitely put that with inside the organization. But I feel like AI will help with personalization as well, personalizing the user experience. So, an example I can think of is like today we shop on Amazon. So, say I buy like a fall sweater, and then 2 days later, I start getting like emails from Amazon saying, hey, we found this product that fits what you bought the other day. Or if you buy something for your kitchen and there's an accessory that goes with it, it can identify that you bought that and then suggest those personalized, products or things that may be on your radar that you don't want to purchase just yet. So I think it'll be good at product recommendations and meeting the user where they are in a moment.
Um, Thinking about switching gears a bit and thinking about your mentorship. So one, I love that you take the time to do that. But I try to suggest to my mentees, like, go in with like a plan, right? Because you're busy. So we're having these mentee conversations. What do you look for in a mentee? How do you choose who you would spend time with and give your time to?
When I work with a mentee, what I look for is that curiosity. So definitely that is a trait that we need in user experience and product. Why did a user click this button? Why did a user go to this page? There could be many, many reasons. Why did a user navigate the menus this way? That goes back to information architecture. So I think with a mentee, having them ask questions, don't be afraid to ask questions, because I feel like that's the biggest trait to have as a UXer is understanding, how a user is going to interact with the interface, understanding what's going on in the industry, what's going on with AI, having that continuous learning mindset as well. So another suggestion I would have is sign up for daily newsletters and have those micro learning moments of 10, 15 minutes a day where you're reading about what's happening in the industry. That's super beneficial to do that.
I'm gonna add that to my list. Thank you. I don't even think about yeah. I'm gonna add that to my list. Micro learning opportunity.
Yep.
Okay, so one thing that I try to tell people is, all the work that we do is cool, but we have to be whole people. So,
Yeah.
what are some things that you do outside of work?
Yeah. So obviously spend time with family. I love spending time with them. Another thing I like to do is go to the gym. So people are like, you're crazy. You go at 5 a.m. And I say, yep, but that's my thinking time.
Hmm.
So it's interesting when you're out of your setting that you're usually in. And then when you're exercising, I feel like it just helps you think of ideas. It helps you get your thoughts in place. It's definitely, I would recommend exercising. And then I also like to paint. So as a graphic designer, that was my passion, was art. And so I do like to paint, when I get the time to do that, and then read as well, reading those books like Continuous Discovery. There's a whole bunch of resources. Erica Hall is a great one too. She's a great author. I would say, get those pieces of learning in when you can, but also know when to have fun, because if you're continuously working all the time and trying to work, then that's when burnout happens. So, like you mentioned, doing something outside of that work everyday realm is important to get your mind rejuvenated.
So then the last question I'll ask you, I guess I have two more.
Mhm.
So for that designer who's sitting here wondering, is this the right field for them, or what's the future of UX? What would you tell them?
Future of UX, I would say understanding the user with research. I mean, empathizing with the user. That's what got me interested in accessibility, being empathetic, understanding how users use an interface in the multiple ways that they do. I mean, even voice assistants, I feel like that's coming down. I mean, obviously, there's Alexa and Google Home. I have Alexa here in my home. And so, when I injured myself earlier this year, I would say, "Hey, Alexa, turn off the lights," or "Hey, Alexa, turn on the TV." So I think that automated aspect will definitely become, the future, as well as chat interfaces. So now we talk about like a lot of the UI and how someone's navigating that. Well, those AI assistants are like SEO. They will go through and crawl the web and bring back results in like your chat GTs and things like that. So I think having those interfaces will be there, but we'll be optimizing them for, those AI agents and assistants instead of SEO. I mean, SEO will still be there, but
Hmm.
I believe it'll transform to the AI agents and serving up results for them to answer questions when a user interacts with ChatGPT or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that my clients ask, and even my marketing team ask. Right, right. Where did you hear about us? And it's ChatGPT, right? It's like,
ChatGPT.
yeah, they're not necessarily, they try both, right? But a lot of people are going to ChatGPT or something like that first, and then going and doing like a deeper search into like a Google. All
Yeah.
right. So then the last question, I promise, is there anything else you would want to leave with my audience? Anything you want them to take with them from this interview?
Oh, I want to share a quote that I share with others regarding accessibility. It's by Tim Berners-Lee. He's director of the W3C and the World Wide Web. And that quote is, "The power of the web is in its universality. Access by anyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect." So I think, we're designing for everyone, designing inclusive interfaces. Think about how someone outside of, your office is going to use something. It may be someone maybe driving and they're talking through Siri or another voice assistant. Think about that. Think about how it's not only digital, it impacts them from the beginning of their journey with the product all the way till the end. So I just think making an impact and designing for all is very important.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I enjoyed chatting with you. I really appreciate your time. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.